What if the place you call home isn't as safe as you think? What if a simple afternoon at the pool could turn into a battle for your right to belong? It was a blistering afternoon in Austin, Texas. The sun beat down relentlessly on the pavement, casting shimmering heat waves in the air. Jordan Reynolds had just punched in the gate code, stepping into the cool, inviting pool area for a moment of peace. Little did he know that peace was about to be shattered. Jordan loosened the tie around his neck and sighed in relief at the sight of the pool. It had been another grueling day at work, endless emails, meetings that dragged on longer than they should have, and deadlines that seemed to multiply. He wasn't normally one to take a dip in the middle of the afternoon, but today was different. He needed this. The pool area was quiet, a typical summer afternoon. A few residents were scattered around, an elderly couple sunbathing, a teenager scrolling through her phone under an umbrella, a father in the shallow end with his toddler. It was a kind of mundane scene that made Austin feel like home. Jordan pulled off his polo shirt, draped it over a chair, and sank his feet into the water. The warm surface was still refreshing. He closed his eyes, letting the coolness seep into his tired body. The sounds of cicadas buzzing in the background, mixed with the distant laughter of kids and the occasional splash from the pool. Then he felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. He opened his eyes and saw her, sitting on the other side of the pool, early 60s, blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, a wide sun hat. At first, her gaze was neutral, but as soon as their eyes met, something shifted. She was rigid, tense, and he could feel it. He didn't react, not immediately. Instead, he slid into the deeper part of the pool, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. If she had something to say, he figured she'd say it. But the feeling didn't go away. He could sense her eyes tracking him, her posture stiffening. Then he caught it. A whisper, just loud enough for him to hear. "Shouldn't be here. I'll wait." Jordan's stomach tightened. He had seen this before, knew exactly what was coming. It was the same script every time. The suspicion, the disapproval, the phone call that he tried to keep his mind focused, keeping his emotions in check. If he reacted too soon, if he gave her even a flicker of frustration, she'd twist it, turning it into something it wasn't. So he stayed still, calm. And then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of her calling the cops. "I'm calling because there's a man in the pool area, and I don't think he belongs here." The words cut through the heavy air, sharp and cold. Jordan's gut churned, but his face remained impassive. He could have reacted. He could have marched right over, demanded an explanation, told her she was out of line. But that's exactly what she wanted, a reaction. So instead he turned, swimming toward the far side of the pool, as though she wasn't worth the energy it would take to argue. His mind was racing. How long would it take for the cops to arrive? 2 minutes? 5? Would they listen to him? Would they even give him a chance to explain himself before deciding he didn't belong? The officers were on their way, and he knew that when they arrived, he wouldn't just be the man in the pool anymore. He would be whatever she had made him, whatever story she had told. His heart thudded in his chest. He had every right to be there. He paid rent. His name was on the lease. But none of that seemed to matter to her. In her eyes, he was a trespasser, a problem. He glanced up at her again. She was still on the phone, talking in that fake, concerned tone, just loud enough for him to hear. "I come to this pool all the time, and I've never seen him before." Jordan could feel the weight of the stares around him. The elderly couple, the father with his toddler, the teenager under the umbrella, everyone had heard. Everyone was watching that a few moments later. The sirens wailed in the distance, a sharp, cutting sound that sent a chill down his spine. The woman smiled, satisfied with the chaos she'd unleashed. Jordan stood at the edge of the pool, his body tense, knowing that his peace had already been stolen. And as the sirens grew louder, he realized the question that lingered, the one he couldn't shake. What happens when the place you call home turns into a place where you're not wanted? Jordan Reynolds had just entered the apartment complex pool area, desperate for a break from a long, tiring day. The sun hung high over Austin, Texas, its heat oppressive. He undid his tie, dropped his polo shirt onto a lounge chair, and dipped his feet into the water. As he relaxed, a familiar feeling began to settle over him. He was being watched on the other side of the pool, A woman, probably in her late 50s, stared at him. Her blonde hair was pulled back under a wide-brimmed sun hat, and she sat rigid, holding her phone as if preparing for something. At first, Jordan thought nothing of it, but then her gaze grew more intense. Her lips were pursed, her fingers white-knuckled around the phone. He tried to ignore her, sinking deeper into the pool. But her attention never wavered, her eyes tracking him like a hawk. He could feel the tension in the air growing, the discomfort building with each passing moment. Minutes passed, and Jordan was sure he could hear her muttering something under her breath. Finally, he caught the words, "He's acting suspicious." His stomach churned. He'd seen this play out before, and he knew exactly where it was heading. The stares, the whispers, the call to the police. Sure enough, the woman's phone was soon pressed to her ear, and Jordan heard her claim, "There's a man in the pool area. I don't think he belongs here." His breath hitched, but his face remained impassive. He had done nothing wrong. He paid his rent. This was his home. But none of that mattered to her. To her, he was an intruder. A few minutes later, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. The woman glanced at Jordan with a smirk, as if she had won. But Jordan wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. He stayed calm, keeping his focus on the water, letting the tension bubble beneath the surface point. 2 officers arrived, one black, one white. The woman immediately stood up, pointing at him, her voice firm as she said, "That's him." The black officer turned to her, asking for her apartment number. Her confidence faltered. She stammered, I visit a lot," but her story didn't hold up. The manager of the complex, who had stepped out of a leasing office, confirmed she didn't live there, and the officers began to turn their attention to her. The woman's face paled. She tried to backpedal, claiming she was just concerned, but the officers weren't having it. They told her she had called the police over nothing and accused her of trespassing. "I wasn't accusing him," she protested weakly. But the black officer shot back, "You made it seem like he was a threat." Her bravado evaporated. For the first time, she stood frozen, her phone now trembling in her hands. The officers, unwavering, demanded she show identification or leave. Her smugness was gone, replaced by a thinly veiled panic. As she hesitated, Jordan couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was a moment of quiet justice, but it left a bitter aftertaste. If the officers had acted any differently, if the manager hadn't stepped outside, who knew how this might have ended? He had lived through too many moments like this, times when the wrong person had the power to decide his fate. The woman finally stormed off, escorted out by the officers. Jordan stayed by the pool, watching as the situation unraveled. The tension in the air faded, but it wasn't gone. He couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, as satisfying as it was, wouldn't change much. It hadn't stopped the cycle. It hadn't changed anything about how the world saw him. Jordan Reynolds sat by the pool, his feet gently dipping in the water. The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly on the complex, but the heat was nothing compared to the weight of the past few moments. His thoughts were interrupted as he ran a hand over his face, pushing the droplets of water that clung to his skin away. The moment had passed, but the exhaustion remained. Not the physical kind that came from the swim, but something deeper, something bone deep. The kind of tiredness that no amount of rest could shake off. The complex manager walked over, standing a few feet away. His face was unreadable, and for a moment they both said nothing. Then he spoke. "You okay?" Jordan let out a slow, weary breath. "I don't know." The manager nodded, understanding more than he was probably comfortable admitting. "You shouldn't have to deal with that." Jordan gave a humorless chuckle. "But I do." The manager's mouth pressed into a tight line. "If you ever have issues like that again, come to me first. You shouldn't have to defend your right to be here." Jordan appreciated the words, but they felt hollow. Because this wasn't just about the pool, or the woman, or even this building. It was about the fact that it could happen anywhere. It was about the fact that it happened all the time. That he looked toward the gate where the woman had walked out minutes ago. Her head was low, her shoulders stiff, her world momentarily turned upside down. She'd tasted what it felt like to be accused of something she didn't do. But Jordan knew she got to walk away from this. He knew she would go home. Not everyone had that luxury. The teenager with her phone was the next to speak up. You want the video? Jordan turned to her, raising a brow. You filmed the whole thing? She shrugged, the smirk on her lips saying more than her words ever could. Yeah. Might send it to someone. Her meaning was clear. The woman's bad day wasn't over yet. Jordan let out a quiet breath, glancing up at the sky. The sun was still high. The world was still turning. The day was still stretching out before him. And yet, nothing had changed. The woman was gone. The police had left. The situation had been resolved. But Jordan sat there, the weight of it all still pressing on his chest. The elderly couple had packed up and left. The father had scooped up his daughter and walked away. Even the teenager, after a few more minutes of scrolling through her phone, slipped out through the gate. Jordan remained alone, his thoughts swirling. He thought about how quickly the woman had moved to weaponize the police. How easy it had been for her to assume her words carried more weight than his. How dangerous that assumption could have been. This time, it had played out differently. The officers had asked the right questions. The property manager had stepped in. People had watched. But what if none of that had happened? What if the cops had come in with their minds already made up? What if no one had been paying attention? He rubbed a hand over his face, pushing back the frustration that threatened to surface. It was exhausting, knowing that no matter how right you did everything, you could still end up in the wrong situation. Jordan thought about the woman, about the moment when she realized the narrative had slipped out of her control. Had she learned anything? Would she walk away from this questioning herself, or would she convince herself she was the victim? He'd been here before, different places, different faces, the same story. But this time, something had shifted. Not for her. For him. Because, for the first time in a long time, someone else had spoken up. Someone had paid attention. And maybe, just maybe, that meant things could change. Not overnight, not easily, but one moment at a time. Jordan stood up, grabbing his towel and draping it over his shoulder. His skin was still damp, but the heat had dried most of the water. As he walked toward the gate, he passed the complex manager, who gave him a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement. A moment of understanding passed between them. Jordan didn't need an apology. He didn't need validation. He just needed the world to do better. He stepped through the metal gate, hearing it click shut behind him. Tomorrow life would go on. But today had been a lesson for everyone. If this story made you think, share it. Speak up. Pay attention. Change doesn't happen in silence.